What I wanted to do today is talk about goal setting, and I started by handing out a form called the allocation form. So my thoughts about goal setting, there are different ways in which you could do it. Let me find this form, the allocation form. And I'm going to, I have a website called dotheonething.com, and I'm going to post all of these things on that site afterwards so you can get your hands on the form. The beginning of this, there are a lot of different ways, and what I'm hoping to do is to identify people that are interested in selling real estate at a somewhat more serious level. And the starting point usually for goal setting is, what do you need now? And then what would your goal be after a year, 3 years, and finally the sometime in the future kind of a goal. And the allocation form is really sort of designed to give you an idea of what do you need now. And so this, by the way, would be useful even if you were doing real estate in a part-time basis or had another job. And the idea is, well, how much money would you need to make in order to be happy, right? Or according to this, just to break even. And what this is a PDF form I've created just because I'm that kind of I'm that kind of a person. I've created a version of this that uses I don't need all of that uses Microsoft Excel, which I've made as a Google spreadsheet. Let me pull that up. And we're just going to go through this sort of as an example. Sorry, it's taking me a minute. Oh, here it is. It's already up. So the idea is, what would be a typical, how much is a house payment, and the thing that I was messing up when I first did this is, how much are you spending? What would be a monthly allocation for food? Well, it depends on how big you are, I guess. Right. Let's just say $1,000. $1,000 a month. I eat more than. How about 1,000 a month? Let's just say that. So that would be 12,000 a year. Now, this obviously, what my form does is it automatically adds up, and so the idea is, this is just this is just like a dry run to give you an idea. So to spend a little bit of time to figure out, well, what are my real expenses? How much money would I need to make from real estate to be self-sufficient, self-supporting? And we could add in a car payment. Let's say that was $6,000. This is $42,000. And then business expenses, yearly amounts. How much would you be spending in a particular month in terms of, let's say, making copies, handing out flyers, postage, that sort of thing? Does anybody have an estimate? About $400 a month. So times 12 months would be, how about this equals 400 times 12. How about that? Nice thing about spreadsheets. The market center with errors and emissions and insurance is $170 a month. Nick, were you including that in your 400?
I'm sorry?
Were you including the 170 to the market center in that 400?
No.
Okay. So this equals 170 times 12. That's $2,040. If you have a car payments that's related to business, marketing aids, we're going to lump all that together. Trips, education, tithing, etc. And remember Jeff was talking about investing in yourself, making a plan to go to family reunion or mega camp, right? Let's put in $2,500 as an annual expense. Now, what my form is doing as we're adding this in, and a copy of this is going to be available on my site, Do the One Thing. If you like spreadsheets, some people don't like spreadsheets, but the PDF version works as well. You just need a calculator. It's added together that our personal and business expenses combined, including living and business, is $51,340. For taxes, I've had it, well, that equals this. My recommendation would be times 0.30 to use 30%. I had it right. As a tax, if you don't know what your tax bracket is, right, 30% would be conservative, right? If you're making a lot of money, 40% would be something. If you're not making very much money, 25% might, but this is 30%. So that would mean $51,000 in expenses and $15,000 in taxes, which would leave us, you would need $66,742 in order to reach that, to reach that amount. Now, assuming that your average gross commission was 15 grand, which could be low. It's about a $600,000 sale, 2.5% side, right, would be 15,000. And when you're starting off, and while you're and have a transaction partner and in the mentoring program, it's on a different split, and then that split changes. So what I've done is I've just assumed 50%. By the way, that would change dramatically. Like that's sort of like the average of 6 if you take the two and blend them together. But assuming that, in other words, if you end up with a higher overall split than that, you're just going to make more money, right? Which wouldn't be a bad. That would require 9 transactions, right? Does everybody now? What we're going to do with this now? I'm going to be reaching out to everybody that's in the coaching program, because what I would like to get from everybody is a goal. And whether or not you want to go through all of this all of this opportunity of looking at your actual expenses and figuring out what you need, or if you just say, I want to do 8 transactions, 10 transactions, we need to end up with a number. Right, because once we end up with a number, we're going to then go through the other steps. Right, so all I'm really trying to do today is come up with some numbers. Now, are there any questions about that? This is called the allocation form. I actually am going to probably rename it to need analysis, right? Because that's really what it's about, but I didn't name the form to begin with. This would be 9 transactions. I'm going to be uploading them later today to my Do the One Thing website. Those of you that are here, I'll email you a link when I'm done.
So that would be 9 transactions.
At a $600,000 price point.
The 70-30 split.
This is actually assuming a 50-50 split.
50-50 split. Okay.
All right, so we're padding it. Because on the first 3, there's mentoring and coaching and other things, and then after that, it jumps, right? And then it all depends. I have a second. Anyhow, what I would like to do is to get everybody in to come up with a number, and then we're going to work up a plan. Now, once you've done that, this would be one step, right, of doing it, which is basically, what do I need in order to survive? I don't know if that's not the next step is something called the economic model. And eventually we're going to work out what a 3-year goal and what would be a sometime in the future goal. But for a 1-year goal, this is sort of the MREA clinic in a few minutes. And the person who developed this form, his name is Calvin Merrigan. He's the Market Center Administrator in Minnesota, in Rochester, I believe. So I'm going to just put in my name, right? But when you get this, you can download it. And one of the things that I ought to call your attention, you ought to have part of your goal, how many people you're going to add into your first level profit share tree. Right? You ought to be thinking, we had an agent this year, one agent who did over 6,000 in 1 month in profit share, and another agent who did $4,500 in 1 month in profit share. Right? Now, I'm just saying. Right, so this is you ought to have a goal, and what I'm going to do is, right now it says 175,000. Why don't we just leave that number for fun, right? Or would you like to make it bigger? Do you guys have bigger? Let's start with 175, but you would put in whatever your goal, and this requires a little bit of tweaking. This cap reflects what is in Rochester, Minnesota, which is $19,000. Ours is $30,000. Now, if you're saying, well, I wish I was in Minnesota then because my cap is only $19,000, look at their sales price, which is $185,000. So there's every up has a down, and $3,000 is the royalty cap. Now, it's generally considered a good plan that you want 60% of your business to come from listings and 40% from buyers. Now, I have people who say, I'd rather work with buyers than sellers, so you can change that. But the Keller Williams best practices would be that you want to have the long term, you want to focus on listings. So let's say we're going to leave it this way, but you could change the statistics. That would mean 105,000 would come from listings and 70,000 would come from buyers. That would equal the 170. Our price, why don't we put in $650? And it's true that in some markets there's a pronounced difference between listing side and selling side, and I've looked at ours and it isn't a huge difference. And rather than 3, we're going to put in 2.5 because we're special. And what that would do is it's going to change our numbers from, so that on roughly you're getting $16,250 gross each time you sell a $650,000 house. Now, the percent, this would be sort of what you're going to be doing after you're through the launch. Right now, 70% is the standard split. People that are in my momentum coaching program, it's 65% because I get 5%, and but we can leave that at 70. And you understand this is really sort of once you're through the launch process, what's next, right? Now, what that would mean is that you would get you'd pay $4,875 in company dollars on each transaction, so $975 to Keller Williams International. You would be getting $10,400, and notice the breakdown. That would mean 6 listings and 4 buyers. So that's not a huge difference from what we came up from the last one. And percent that actually close, our listings percent that actually close is way higher. But why don't we just say 80%? See how that sometimes it likes that. And buyers that close, we're just going to say 80%. All right, we're just going to. Some of the now then it comes to, so that would mean you would need 8 listings, 5 buyers in order to reach that, which means less than 1 a month would be the appointments that you would need. Now, if you went on a listing appointment, if you went on 10 listing appointments, how many listings would you get? 10 would be nice, but it may not be that high. The MREA models, which was talking to millionaire real estate agents, they were getting 80%. Now, your mileage may vary, but we're going to just leave it that way. One of the things that's good to do is to track these numbers as you're going along, because let's say you're getting the listing appointments, but you're not getting listings. We ought to talk about that. Right? Yes, because there may be something you could do with your listing presentation. Sometimes it's just a question of being better at closing for the listing. I learned eventually not to leave until they signed the listing or threatened to call the cops. Right? Just about. Right. So there are things that we could work on, the listing presentation, closing, preparation, if we knew where your numbers are, but you have to have numbers in order to know, where. So with this, now we're down to 10% list and appointments. You're going to, annual appointments, you're going to need 10 listing appointments a year, 7 buyer appointments a year, and 11 closed transactions. So 11 closed transactions. Now, the amount you're going to net is going to be a little bit less because we haven't taken out the income and, the company dollar. So that puts us down at 142. Now, if you're saying, well, 142 is not enough, why don't we change this number just to see what happens? So we're going to say we want to gross 200,000. That puts our net at 167. Right, before expenses. Now, these expenses on this list, and this one's done monthly, are on the categories of the MREA, and I have a breakdown because, what does this mean, right? And the reason why that's sort of weird is because the education, for example, is a coding that includes multiple listing service and the Board of Realtors, right, which is sort of odd, right? But if it doesn't really matter what we call them, we just need to know what they are. So what does it cost monthly to be in the MLS? It's like $66 a month, right? And it's the Board of Realtors. What did it cost to renew this year? About $800, a little less, isn't that right? So if you pay, so if we were let's just say, and I'm doing this sort of sloppy, but let's say you just took your different amounts and not worrying about the categories. All right, I'm not that bad at math. Let me do this. All right, so if we were to take $66, which is what it costs per month in the MLS, if you pay them on a quarterly basis, right? If you pay them in a lump sum, it's $54 a month. So 170 is for the market center. What is this equals, let's say 800 divided by 12. What happened? That's $66. Why don't we just round that up to what that is the this is MLS, this is the market center, and this is the Association of Realtors. What I've done is I took its annual number and divided by 12. Okay. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to auto sum that. So that's $302. We'll make it $303 a month. We're going to put in here. And so when we do that, what it's going to do down here, it's figured out what that operating expense is. Now for marketing and other supplies, let's just say equipment supplies. Again, it's not always important where we put it, but let's just say $400 a month. And what that now does, I have to, where did it go? $400 a month. So now we're up to $8,436. I have a little more involved version of this when we get to 3-year and sometime goals where this could be broken down, but it doesn't really matter what category as long as we allocate all of the money that we're spending. Okay, so $400 a month, $303 a month. Did you realize that it costs like $700 to $1,000 a month? Some of you painfully aware. And if we wanted to put in some other things, let's just say $100 a month in technology, and why don't we just what this does is that it takes these numbers, adds it down here, and does the subtraction. So using those numbers, which we'll be looking at $800 a month in expenses, which would be $9,636 in a year, our net income would be $157,364, and you'd be making $96 an hour. That's assuming a 40-hour work week, which puts you just a little bit below the average plumber. It's sort of a joke, but not too funny if you've had a plumber. All right, is everybody with me on this? Right, now this takes a little bit of time, but what we ought to do is not only should we go through the process, but every quarter take a look at it and see how we're doing. Well, all right, so this means I need 12 transactions. Where are they going to come from? The other model is called the lead generation model. And this also, I'm going to upload all of these, right? The lead generation model, which I've already pre-populated with the number of 12. So the form, you could change this, right, to a different number. There are two ways there are two kinds of people that you could do business with, the people that you've met and the people that you haven't met. And you could do a combination. If you decided that you wanted to just work with people that you've met, one of the questions I often get from agents is, does networking and networking events count as lead generation? The answer is yes. Right? It's possible to, well, let's look at it. If the MREA numbers were that for every 12 names of people that you've met that you were doing a real follow-up system with. Now, the 33 touch is what people were using. What they didn't mean is that you went into eEdge and launched a 33 touch email system and walked away from it. Right? That's not a real 33 touch system. The real system involves meeting people on a quarterly basis, calling them on the phone, personalizing the information, mailing something to them occasionally. It's not just launching a generic email program and ignoring them. But 2 for every 12, what that would mean is that 72 people in your database getting 2 transactions, either from them buying or selling or knowing somebody that's going to buy or sell, would be a sufficient number in order to do 12 transactions. And so if you said, well, I don't know anybody, I've actually had agents say, I don't know anybody, or nobody I know likes me, or nobody I know has any money. Right? All of the people I know are broke. Right? Now, you might want to try to meet some more people, but the ratio of people that you haven't met using the MREA numbers was 50-1, which means you would need to talk to 50 people to find one person. That number might even be higher. That would require 600 people in your database that you're following up with. If you said, well, I'm going to do a combination, so I want 40%, and I was just fooling around, let's say 60% are going to come from the people you've met and 40% from the people that you haven't met, and we should round this up. That would mean that you would need about 43 people in your Mets and 240 in your haven't Mets in order to reach that goal. All right, now, for those of you that are serious about doing this, I would like to sit down and go through this process with you. Now that we've done that, what else could we possibly do? That's not the right one. The next system, let me see if I can pull this up, is called the 135. And I have borrowed, researched this from the 135 is a Gary Keller idea. Jay Papasan and Ben Kinney did a seminar together at last family reunion. Jay Papasan, of course, you may know, is the co-author of The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, The Millionaire Real Estate Investor, Shift, and The One Thing. And Ben Kinney is just like a rock star. And so I pretty much borrowed this from them. And they were talking about setting this for pretty much everything. Let me just make sure I can make this fit the page. How about that? Yeah. And this is also called the GPS, which is goals, priorities, and strategies. And so the idea is that you would make a goal, come up with a priority to reach the goal, and then a strategy. So a goal would be, I'm going to close X number of homes in 1 year. I'm going to close 12 transactions equaling 100 and 200,000 in gross commission income, right? Do you understand? So it could be the dollar volume, but basically the goal is to come up with a number. The 135 doesn't work unless we come up with a number. And the priorities are generally pretty straightforward. You're going to need buyers, sellers, and then the third priority is called the who, have, know. Jeff was talking about this morning during the team meeting. What if you were going to invest money or time into your inventory, into your product? What you'd be doing is investing time in yourself. So what we really mean about you're the product, right? Does that right? What you sell are not homes, unless you're the investor or right. Those are principals. You're an agent, so you're not selling homes. What you're selling is a bundle of services for buyers and sellers to use when buying and selling real estate. That's the product. You're the product. So one question is, how's the product, right? How is the product right now? And so one of the things that we're going to focus on is working on the product, because what you might need to do is to allocate time every day, perhaps, on working on who you need to know, what you need to have, what you need to know in order to be more successful. So an example of this is I will close, let's say, out of 12, 6 buyer transactions. I've already forgotten the numbers. So priority number 2 is I'm going to close so many sellers. And priority number 3, I've already written out, actually Ben Kinney and Jay Papasan did. In order to get different results, I will need to know, have, and be in business with different people. So as an example, these are examples of strategy. So once you say, all right, I'm going to close X number of buyers, where are they going to come from? So a sphere of influence. How many? Now this number 6, 3, 2, 4, and 3 were written in on the example that Ben Kinney was doing and Jay Papasan when I heard them do this. So that's all what that number means. That's not necessarily your number. This person had pretty good numbers. But how many people do you think you're going to get from your sphere of influence? How many buyers will come from open houses? Are you doing internet marketing? Do you have signs and flyers out? Do you do classes? Now, I'm not saying this is the entire list. The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, by the way, if you may have noticed this when we did this economic model. Notice this list here that was on the economic model of prospecting and marketing. This isn't an exclusive list, but this comes from page 138 of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent. And basically, it's the ways in which you could find buyers. Now, there's no law that says you have to have 5. But you need to once you've decided I'm going to get 6 buyers to buy a house, the next question is, where are we going to get them from? All right, and to try to and then if I'm going to have 6 sellers, where am I going to get them from? Some could come from sphere of influence, some from open houses. You can do internet leads, there's expired listings, circle prospecting, farming, seller seminars, investor workshops. There's a lot of different areas, but that's just a sample. Now, Ben Kinney, as I said, the 135 was Gary Keller's idea. I believe it was Ben Kinney's idea to add the 1-3, or maybe Jay Papasan. I shouldn't necessarily, but the 1-3-5-5 who, yeah. And when I first saw this, I thought this is only making it more complicated. But then when I looked at it, it was actually like a really good idea. So we have a goal, close so many transactions. Priority is, let's say, close so many buyers. Strategy number one, sphere of influence. So now that we've decided to do sphere of influence, the question is, how are we going to do the sphere of influence? And I have an example here. So here is, by the way, what I consider to be an excellent sphere of influence plan. So do you understand that we have 5 strategies for finding buyers? One of them is sphere of influence, which is also, by the way, one of our strategies for finding sellers. So once we've decided we're going to work with sphere of influence, the next goal would be come up with 5 things we're going to do in order to contact our sphere of influence and get those transactions. Number 1 could be calling them once a month. Mailing them, this means with a postage stamp, once a month. Emailing them twice a month. Visiting them at least 3 times a year. And reaching out to them in some meaningful way on social media at least once a month. Now that means we might be more active in social media, but making some sort of a contact. I don't know if you've noticed this, but there are some people that respond to Facebook messaging more than they do to email or other things. I hired an agent entirely through Facebook messaging. I did not know her phone number or email address. I could have looked it up, but there was no need to until she showed up at the office to interview and she signed up. Right? I don't know if you've had this experience yet, but I can remember, because I'm really old, when the first time somebody handed me my business card back and said, write your website on it. Right? Now I've had people say, I ask them, what's your email? They'll just say, I'm on Facebook. Right? So that ought to be part of our strategy. So what we could do, and then this who, right? For example, do you have to do all this? Now at the beginning, frankly, to do 12 transactions, you could do all of it. I'm just saying, right? 1 a month. A lot of these plans were developed for people that were needing to do a whole lot more. Well, $185,000 selling price, you would need to do a whole lot more. But do you understand it's possible that you wouldn't have to do everything? For example, how could it be a not me for sending the mailers? Anybody have an idea? How could you mail things to people but not for you to have to do it? You could hire a third party or a person. Are there people that would allow you to hire them and would send out postcards to a mailing list that you've provided them? Right. Corfax. Also, by the way, do you realize that the Keller Williams system uses something called Shutterfly? So like the postcard that I was doing this month in real estate, they'll mail it for you to people. It costs about 80 cents color with postage. How about email? Do you understand it might not, are there some drip email systems that you could come up with? Are there people you could pay money to? Visiting them 3 times a year is probably going to be you. Social media, you can hire people to do some of that for you, but it's probably going to be you. But some of this you could automate. The idea is that if you want to make $96 an hour, you can't be doing $15 an hour work. Right? Or you just have to work many hours. So the MREA book on page 138 has a list of all these different sources, some of which are on that other list. And now, when he's talking about how do you guarantee results, there's 2 things about this. One is that he suggested, Ben Kinney, that you think of the obstacles and things that might come up and what you're going to do. This is called the 1-3, right? So that for each of the things what's going to get in my way, what's going to keep me from doing this, and then to come up with the insurance package as to what you're going to be able to do when that happens. Ben Kinney says, go away. That's not what he says. The real estate success principles are say the right thing, say it enough times, and have enough people. Part of what your strategy ought to be is when you're talking about, that's his insurance thing, what could go wrong. Part of what the strategy ought to be for working on the product. What would be some examples of things you could do to make you a better product? Education. What else? Scripts. Knowing the market. Previewing properties. How is your listing presentation right now? If somebody called you up today and said, I'm thinking about selling my house, can you come over this afternoon? All right. Now, if you have a mentor/transaction partner, your reaction might be, well, I'll just call Pam. Right? I'm going to take her with me. But when you're graduated from that program, now what? How solid is your listing presentation? Have you practiced giving it? Have you gone through the process of asking questions? Right? One of the values that having somebody experienced doing it for you, that's probably the best way to put it, is that they're kind of calm, aren't they? Right? Because it's like no big thing. Right? And yet I know, I remember, it's a distant memory, what it was like to go alone on a listing appointment. Right? So how about your buyer consultation? How good are you at explaining to people the benefits for them of working exclusively with you? How solid is that presentation? Right. So do you understand there are things that we ought to be working on, so that once we no longer have our support person to go with us, that we could go and get a listing and work with the buyer and get a commitment from them. So, and I have a blank one of these forms, but what I say, does that make sense? Right? The idea is that we want to come up with the economic numbers. From the economic numbers, we need to come up with transactions. From the transactions, we need to break down our focus to lead generation. And once we've done that, we need to come up with our strategies in order to reach those lead generation. Now, I know what you're thinking. There couldn't be, that's pretty much it. There couldn't be anything else. And this is one of mine. So I turn in to Jeff. Every week I meet with Jeff. And we go over the 411. So what a 411 would be, and by the way, there's a very good section if you go to kw.com and under resources on the 411. And what the 411 would be to take those items, because you understand the GPS is more of a global positioning system. It's sort of a sky look at it. But what the 411 does is it breaks it down into weekly goals. What would be some examples of weekly goals that you could have? Number of calls made. Appointments taken. People added to database. Could you have a goal for how much time you're going to spend on script practice, market research, practicing presentations, classes to attend? And then by doing this, what we do is we don't just write in all four. So I would put down what my goals are for week number 1, for, let's say, starting the month of January. What are my goals for week number 1? And then then wait till the end of that and then look and see how well I did. Right? My goal was to talk to 25 people. How many did I talk to? How many did I add in my database? Do I need to change my goal for week number 2 to reflect what I didn't do in week number 1? Right, you understand? Because if I'm not doing these numbers down here, I'm not going to be reaching the monthly goals, and if I'm not doing that, I'm not going to reach my annual goals. So the 411 is to break down into a weekly time plan. And by the way, if you want to see a really good 411, I'm not sure, this is a new computer, so it may not be in it hasn't been, it's not on this computer yet, but if you were to go to, how much time do I have? Just a little bit. If you were to go to kw.com, am I still logged in? Could be. Let's just see. Let me just show you a couple of resources. Because if you're interested in seeing what a 411 would look like, and I have some examples of 135s. Come on. I would be happy to. They're available right now. So if you go over here to resources, notice there's it wants me to start over here. Under resources, it says 411 tools. Does everybody see that? And there's also an Ignite accountability section on the 411. And if you were wondering how would I find that, you go up here and type in Ignite. And this is the one to click on. And by the way, there's a toolkit which has got lots of useful stuff. You can download the student manuals, which I might as well do it. And there's a sample 411. So what I'm going to do on Do the One Thing, I'm going to put a link to this video. I'm going to put copies of all the forms that I went through, including the Ben Kinney, Jay Papasan slides, just in case you want to look at them. I don't know. And blank 411 and all that sort of stuff, right? Doesn't that, I can see you're all excited about that. At which? Oh, the section on 411? It's called, which session is that? 5? Or 10? 10, I think. Accountability check-in on time blocking is 10. And it's, by the way, if you aren't doing 16 transactions a year, you might want to go through Ignite again. It's not, which one did you say it was? So it's not there. 10. That's okay. Anyhow, I will put the 411, that's not the right one. So I will go ahead and put it on the site as well. But there's a particular one. This looks like it. 13. And it has a sample of a 411 for an agent, which, by the way, is not a bad. Here we go. It's Power Session 13.
Okay, so I just typed in Ignite, and the page I come up with just has a bunch of links.
I just did it, and what I got was, when I typed in Ignite, the first thing that came up is the link. So this, I typed in Ignite, and the first link that comes up is it. The first link, KW Ignite. So, and so this particular has a sample 411, and it could be used for personal, financial, business. You see this example, and it even breaks it down to some samples for weekly goals. Right? Isn't that? And
Go back to the page, the landing, to the Ignite page again. Let me see what you clicked on. Okay, so you clicked on that, right?
student, I downloaded the file.
And then you click on the student.
Right, downloaded them. And then there's also a toolkit which you should also download. All right? So, and we're meeting on a regular basis. And Nick, if you'd like to, or Eloise, if you're interested in doing this, right, it requires a little bit of commitment. This takes a little bit of time, but I'd be happy to meet with you to help you put together all this stuff. All right? Well, that's all I got then. Any questions?